The voicemail is still on my phone. I've saved it through 4 different devices over the past 7 years, transferring it each time like some kind of digital penance. Archer's voice, steady and calm, telling me he's leaving town for good and that he hopes I find what I'm looking for. No anger, no bitterness, just that quiet certainty that used to drive me crazy when we were together. The certainty I mistook for weakness. I was 28 then, convinced I had relationships figured out. I worked at a marketing firm downtown, wore power suits that made me feel invincible, and dated men who fit into neat categories. The ambitious ones, the safe ones, the ones who looked good at company parties. Archer didn't fit any of my categories, which should have been my first clue that he might actually matter. We met in the arts district. I was there networking, nursing a glass of wine, and pretending to understand abstract expressionism while scanning the room for potential clients. Archer was standing in front of a massive canvas covered in what looked like angry red slashes, completely absorbed. He had this way of looking at things, art, people, life, like he was seeing layers the rest of us missed. "It's about grief," he said when he noticed me watching him. "The artist's mother died while he was painting this series. You can see it in the brushstrokes, all that controlled chaos." I looked at the painting again, trying to see what he saw. "How do you know that?" I read the placard. He smiled, and something in my chest fluttered. But also, my mom's an art therapist. I grew up learning to read emotions in colors and shapes. Most men would have tried to impress me with their knowledge or their connections. Archer just shared a piece of himself, as naturally as breathing. It was disarming. We talked for 2 hours. He was a freelance photographer, specializing in documentary work that rarely paid well, but fulfilled something in him I couldn't quite understand. He'd just returned from a project documenting the last family farm in our county, spending weeks photographing 3 generations working land that had been in their family for 90 years. "Sounds depressing," I said, thinking about my own work helping corporations rebrand themselves for quarterly earnings reports. "It was beautiful," he corrected gently. "Sad but beautiful." The grandmother's hands had these incredible lines, like a roadmap of everything she'd planted and harvested. Her granddaughter has the same hands, just smoother. There's something powerful about continuity, about staying connected to what matters. I should have listened more carefully to what he was telling me about himself, about what mattered to him. We started dating that fall. Archer was unlike anyone I'd been with, thoughtful where others were reactive, gentle where others were aggressive. He brought me flowers from his neighborhood farmer's market instead of expensive bouquets from the florist. He cooked dinner for me on nights when I came home exhausted from work, never making me feel guilty for being tired or stressed. "You work too hard," he'd say, massaging my shoulders while pasta boiled on the stove. "There's more to life than climbing ladders. Someone has to pay for this apartment," I'd reply, gesturing around my downtown loft. "Dreams don't pay bills." He'd get quiet then, and I'd feel a small stab of guilt. But I pushed it away. I was practical. I was successful. I was doing what adults were supposed to do. The differences between us seemed charming at first. He'd drag me to documentary screenings at the independent theater, while I'd take him to networking events and industry parties. He'd listen politely while my colleagues talked about market penetration and customer acquisition costs. But I could see him retreat into himself, his eyes losing focus. "Your friends are intense," he said, after one particularly brutal evening with my work crowd. "They're focused," I corrected. "They know what they want." "What do you want, Nomi?" The question caught me off guard. I wanted success, obviously, recognition, financial security, a life that looked impressive from the outside. But when I tried to explain this to Archer, the words felt hollow. "I want to matter," I finally said. "I want to build something that lasts." He nodded, but something in his expression suggested he wasn't convinced I was building the right thing. The first time I really noticed how deeply Archer felt things was during a weekend in October. We'd driven to a small town upstate, where he was documenting the closing of the last independent bookstore. The owner, Mrs. Chen, had run the shop for 35 years, but rising rents and declining sales had finally forced her to close. Archer spent the entire day photographing her as she packed books, her wrinkled hands carefully wrapping first editions in tissue paper. "My husband and I opened this place when our daughter was born," Mrs. Chen told us, her voice barely above a whisper. "We wanted to create a space where stories could live, where people could find exactly the book they needed, even if they didn't know they needed it." She gestured to the empty shelves. All these stories, scattered to the wind now. I watched Archer's face as she spoke, saw the way his eyes filled with tears that he didn't try to hide. He knelt beside her, photographing her hands as she wrapped each book, treating her movements like a sacred ritual. When she started crying, he set down his camera and simply sat with her, not rushing to comfort or fix, just bearing witness to her grief. "That's enough for today," he said gently, when she became too overwhelmed to continue. But Mrs. Chen shook her head, insisting she wanted to finish. "The stories deserve to be honored," she said, "even in leaving." Archer nodded and picked up his camera again, but I could see the way her words affected him, how they seemed to validate something he already understood about the importance of witnessing endings. On the drive home, I tried to lighten the mood. "At least she's getting a good price for the building," I said. "That location will be worth a fortune once they develop it." Archer was quiet for so long I thought he hadn't heard me. Finally, he said, "She's not selling because she wants to know me. She's selling because she has to. There's a difference." "I know that," I said, feeling defensive. "I'm just trying to find the silver lining." But even as I said it, I knew how hollow it sounded. There was no silver lining to 35 years of dreams ending in cardboard boxes and tissue paper. Archer understood that instinctively. I kept trying to rationalize it away. That night, I found him at his computer, writing captions for the photographs he'd taken. His face was illuminated by the screen, and I could see the concentration in his features as he searched for the right words to honor Mrs. Chen's story. "Listen to this," he said, reading aloud. "Margaret Chen, 67, closes the final chapter of Chapter and Verse Bookstore. Books are like people," she says. "They need homes where they're appreciated." The Bookstore, which hosted over 200 author readings and countless book clubs, will be demolished next month to make way for luxury condominiums. I sat on the edge of his bed, watching him work. "You really care about her, don't you?" "About the Bookstore." He looked up at me, his eyes still red-rimmed from earlier. "I care about what it represents," he said. "Community, stories, the idea that some things matter more than profit margins." The implicit criticism in his words stung, but I pushed the feeling away. "You can't save every bookstore, Archer," I said. "Change is part of life. Progress requires sacrifice." He saved the document and closed the laptop, turning to face me fully. "What if we're sacrificing the wrong thing?" he asked. "What if we're calling destruction progress just because it's easier than admitting we're losing something irreplaceable?" The question hung between us like a challenge. I wanted to argue, to explain the realities of economics and development, but something about his expression stopped me. He wasn't trying to start a debate. He was sharing something fundamental about how he saw the world. I just wasn't sure I wanted to see it the same way. The first crack in our relationship appeared about 8 months in. Archer had been working on a long-term project photographing homeless veterans, spending his afternoons at the downtown shelter. He'd come home with stories about the men he'd met, their struggles and small victories. I'd listen, but impatiently, always aware of the emails piling up on my phone. "Jerry got approved for disability benefits today," he told me one evening, his face bright with genuine joy. "He's been fighting for 2 years. We celebrated with coffee and donuts." "That's nice," I said, not looking up from my laptop. "He cried," Archer continued. "This tough guy who survived 3 tours in Afghanistan. And he just broke down right there in the social worker's office. Happy tears." I made a non-committal sound, focused on a presentation I was preparing for the next day. "Nomi, are you listening?" I looked up, irritated. "Yes, I'm listening." "Jerry got his benefits. That's great. but I have a major presentation tomorrow and I really need to focus. Archer was quiet for a moment. This matters to me, he said quietly. These people matter to me. I know they do. I softened my tone. And that's wonderful, but my career matters to me, and right now I need to prioritize that. He nodded and went into the kitchen. I heard him opening and closing cabinets, the sound of dishes being washed, normal domestic sounds that suddenly felt distant. That night I found him on the couch, looking through contact sheets with a magnifying glass. The black and white photos showed weathered faces, hands holding coffee cups, eyes that had seen too much. They were beautiful and heartbreaking. These are incredible, I said, settling beside him. Thanks. He didn't look up. I'm hoping to get them into a gallery show. Maybe raise some awareness. Will it pay anything? The question hung in the air between us. Archer set down the magnifying glass and looked at me. No, he said. It won't pay anything, but that's not why I'm doing it. I wanted to understand, but I couldn't. How could he spend months on work that wouldn't advance his career or improve his financial situation? How could he care so much about people who couldn't help him in return? I'm not saying it's not important, I said carefully. I just think you need to be more strategic about your time. You're incredibly talented, but talent isn't enough. You need to network, to build relationships with people who can help you. Help me do what? Succeed. What if I told you I already feel successful? I stared at him. You live in a studio apartment and drive a car that's older than some of my interns. And I do work that matters to me. I sleep well at night. I have time for the people I care about. He reached for my hand. I have you. Something about the way he said it, so simple, so grateful, made me uncomfortable. Like he was settling for less than he deserved. And I was part of that settling. The real trouble started in spring. Archer had been working on a piece about the city's plan to demolish a community garden, where immigrant families had been growing vegetables for over a decade. He'd spent weeks documenting the gardeners, learning their stories, photographing their weathered hands in the soil. The city council meeting is next week, he told me one evening. I'm going to present the photo series, try to show them what they'd be destroying. Is that your job? I asked. I thought you were documenting the story, not trying to change the outcome. Sometimes they're the same thing. I watched him prepare for the meeting, printing photos, organizing his presentation. He was nervous in a way I'd never seen before, pacing around his small apartment, rehearsing his speech. You know they're not going to change their minds, I said. The development deal is worth millions. A few photos aren't going to stop progress. Maybe not, he said, but at least people will know what was lost. The night of the city council meeting, I had a work dinner with potential clients. Archer asked if I could reschedule, but I'd already confirmed the reservation at the city's most expensive restaurant. This was a major opportunity. I wish I could be there, I said, kissing him goodbye. But you'll be great. You always are. He looked disappointed but nodded. I understand. Work comes first. That's not fair, isn't it? I left for my dinner feeling defensive and guilty. The clients were impressed with our presentation, and we landed a contract worth more than Archer made in a year. I should have felt triumphant, but instead I kept thinking about him standing in front of the city council, alone. I called him when I got home, but he didn't answer. I found out later that the city council had approved the demolition unanimously, barely looking at his photos. The garden was bulldozed the following week. Archer withdrew after that. He still came to my apartment, still cooked dinner, and listened to my work stories. But something had shifted. He was present, but not entirely there. Like he was protecting some part of himself that I couldn't reach. Are you okay? I asked one evening, finding him quiet and distant. I'm fine, he said, but his eyes were red-rimmed, and he kept looking away from me. You don't look fine. I'm just tired. I knew he was lying, but I didn't push. I had my own problems, a difficult client, a presentation that wasn't coming together, office politics that required careful navigation. I convinced myself that whatever was bothering Archer would pass. It was a Friday night in late spring when everything fell apart. I came home from work to find Archer sitting on my couch, staring at his hands. He looked up when I entered, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. A depth of sadness that made my chest tighten. "The Martinez family called today," he said quietly, "from the garden project." I set down my purse and joined him on the couch. What did they want? Their daughter Elena is getting married in July. They wanted to know if I'd photograph the wedding. His voice was thick. They can't pay much, but they said I was family now, that I understood what the garden meant to them. "That's sweet," I said, though I didn't understand why this was making him so emotional. Elena's grandmother has been teaching her to make mole using tomatoes from the garden. It's a recipe that's been in their family for generations. She wanted to serve it at the wedding, but now... He stopped, his voice breaking. I watched him struggle with his emotions, and something ugly rose in my chest. Impatience, maybe, or embarrassment. Here was this grown man, nearly in tears over vegetables and wedding recipes. "Archer, you can't save everyone," I said. "You can't carry the weight of every sad story you encounter." "I'm not trying to save anyone," he said quietly. "I'm trying to honor their stories, to witness them." "But you're making yourself miserable. Look at you. You're falling apart over a garden." "A garden, Archer. It's not the end of the world." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something change in his face. "You don't understand," he said. "You don't get it at all." "Get what?" "That life is sad sometimes, that things change. That's just reality." "No, that's not." He stopped, shaking his head. Never mind, but I was on a roll now, frustrated by his sadness and my own inability to fix it. "You care too much about things that don't matter. You spend all your time with people who can't help you, on projects that don't pay, getting emotionally invested in situations you can't control." "They matter to me. But they don't matter, Archer. Not really. In 5 years, no one will remember that garden. Elena will be married, living her life, and you'll still be here, broke and heartbroken over some vegetables." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "They matter to me," he repeated. "That's the problem," I said. "You're too soft. You let everything get to you. You cry over strangers' problems like they're your own." He stood up abruptly and walked to the window, his back to me. I could see his shoulders shaking slightly. "Are you crying?" I asked, incredulous. "Are you actually crying right now?" He didn't answer, but I could see him wipe his eyes with the back of his hand. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," I said. "You're too emotional, too sensitive. You need to toughen up, Archer. The world doesn't care about your feelings." He turned around then, and the look on his face stopped me cold. There was no anger, no defensiveness, just a quiet devastation that made my words feel like stones in my mouth. "Is that what you think of me?" he asked. "That I'm weak?" "I think you're tender," I said, trying to soften the blow. "Maybe too tender for your own good?" "Weak," he said, nodding slowly. "You think I'm weak. I didn't say that. You didn't have to." He moved toward the door, and panic flared in my chest. "Where are you going?" "Home," he said. "I need to think." "Archer, wait." But he was already gone, leaving me alone in my perfect apartment with the echo of my own words. I didn't hear from him for 3 days. When I called, it went straight to voicemail. When I texted, he didn't respond. I drove to his apartment, but he wasn't there. I asked our mutual friends, but no one had seen him. On the 4th day, I found him at the community center where he'd been volunteering. He was teaching a photography class to kids from the neighborhood, showing them how to see light and shadow. I watched through the window as he knelt beside a young girl, helping her adjust her camera settings. His face was patient and kind, completely focused on her small triumph as she captured her first clear shot. When the class ended, I approached him in the parking lot. "We need to talk," I said. He looked tired, older somehow. "I don't think we do." "I'm sorry about what I said," I was frustrated and I took it out on you. You weren't wrong, he said quietly. I am too emotional. I do care too much about things that don't matter, Archer. But here's the thing, Nomi. Those things matter to me. Those people matter to me. The Martinez family, the veterans at the shelter, these kids, they matter to me. And if that makes me weak in your eyes, then maybe we're not as compatible as I thought. I felt something shifting between us, something fundamental and irreversible. I don't think you're weak, I said desperately. I think you're good. Better than me, maybe. I don't want to be better than you, he said. I want to be with you, but I can't be with someone who sees my compassion as a character flaw. I can change, I said. I can learn to appreciate. No, he said gently. You can't change who you are any more than I can, and I wouldn't want you to. But I also can't pretend that your words didn't hurt, or that they didn't show me something important about how you see me. We stood in the parking lot as the sun set behind the community center, and I felt him slipping away from me like water through my fingers. What happens now? I asked. I don't know, he said. I need some time to figure things out. That was the last real conversation we had. He called 2 weeks later to tell me he was leaving the city, taking a job with a documentary filmmaker in Montana. He'd be gone indefinitely, maybe permanently. I got your messages, he said, all of them. But I think we both know this isn't working. Please don't go, I said. We can work this out. Can we? His voice was gentle but firm. Can you honestly say you respect who I am, the choices I make, the things I care about? I wanted to say yes, but the words stuck in my throat, because the truth was, I didn't respect his choices. I thought he was wasting his talent, his potential, his life. And he knew it. I hope you find what you're looking for, he said. I really do. The line went dead, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. That was 7 years ago. I've thought about Archer every day since then, wondering what he's doing, whether he's happy, whether he ever thinks about me. I've looked him up online a few times, carefully, like touching a bruise to see if it still hurts. He's doing well, from what I can tell. His documentary work has won awards, been featured in national magazines. He married a teacher named Claire 3 years ago. They have a daughter, in one interview I found. He talks about his philosophy on photography. My job isn't to make people feel comfortable, he says. It's to make them feel something, to witness the full spectrum of human experience and honor it with attention. I wonder if he still cries at movies, still gets emotional over strangers' stories. I hope he does. I hope Claire sees it as the strength I was too scared to recognize. Because I understand now what I couldn't see then. Archer wasn't weak for caring. He was brave. It takes courage to remain open to pain, to let yourself be affected by the suffering of others. It takes strength to choose compassion over cynicism, connection over protection. I built the life I thought I wanted, corner office, impressive salary, recognition in my field. But I'm lonelier than I've ever been. I date men who are safe, who won't challenge me or make me uncomfortable. I've become exactly the kind of person I swore I'd never be, successful and empty. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd gone to that city council meeting instead of my business dinner, if I'd stood beside him as he showed those photos, held his hand as the council voted to destroy something beautiful. If I'd chosen love over ambition just once, but I know it wouldn't have mattered. The problem wasn't that one night or even that one conversation. The problem was deeper. I saw his tenderness as weakness because I'd learned to see my own emotions as liabilities. I'd built walls so high that I couldn't recognize authenticity when it was sitting right beside me on the couch. Archer showed his strength by walking away from someone who couldn't love him fully, by refusing to diminish himself to fit into my narrow definition of success, by choosing to remain soft in a world that rewards hardness. I called him weak for crying, but he showed me what real strength looks like. It looks like knowing your worth and refusing to accept less. It looks like protecting your heart without closing it. It looks like having the courage to leave someone you love when they can't love you back the way you deserve. The voicemail is still on my phone, Sometimes I play it late at night, when the silence in my apartment feels too heavy. His voice steady and kind, wishing me well even as he says goodbye. Even now, after all this time, he's more generous with me than I ever was with him. I hope he knows that I finally understand, that I see his strength now, even if I was too blind to see it then, that I'm grateful he didn't let me change him into someone smaller, someone harder, someone more like me, the one that got away. That's how people talk about lost loves, as if they were fish that slipped off the hook. But Archer didn't get away. He made a choice. He chose himself over someone who couldn't choose him. And that, I've learned, is the strongest thing of all.